Ethiopia's battle with land degradation isn't new. The 1970s and 80s saw ambitious and widespread conservation schemes. Yet most of these efforts came to very little. Why was that? The main reason was top-down planning of huge watersheds that bypassed the very people who lived on the land. They didn't feel ownership, so when breakages occurred in stone walls or gaps appeared in earth bunds, villagers ignored them. Land enclosure had to be enforced with armed guards. But lessons were learned, and at the end of the 1980s a new model was tested. Smaller watersheds combined with community participation. But would it work? The results were remarkably positive. There was a feeling that we can do this together, and the enthusiasm was infectious. Communities took their responsibilities seriously. They planned their own micro-watersheds and put in place the conservation measures required. Their commitment and hard work paid off. Rainfall stayed on the land and crops grew better. There was more grass for their animals. Of course, the villagers needed some help. Central government gave support through policies and finance, and experts provided technical advice in the field. In this way, a new and exciting participatory approach was born. And matched with appropriate technologies, it was captured in the 2005 National Watershed Guidelines. Projects working on watershed development gradually came together and followed these guidelines. The Sustainable Land Management Programme was no exception. So with policy and finance in place, guidelines established, and technical help at hand, where does the process begin? Well, the guidelines tell us that there are 8 steps in the process. The first step is at district level, where a Wareda watershed team is set up. This technical unit identifies priority micro-watersheds after district-scale mapping. These micro-watersheds are very small, between 200 and 500 hectares in size. But that makes sense to villagers, especially where the boundaries match those of the community. Now villagers can focus on their own land and seek answers to their own problems. The second step is the formation of community watershed teams. They are voted in by the community members. Each team, made up of women and men, carries out a participatory survey of its own community micro-watershed. And that's step 3. The guidelines then take us through the 4th step, where the community watershed team decides which technologies to use, with guidance from the Wareda watershed team. There may be terraces or earth bunds, tree planting or area closure. It's usually a mixture, and the choice is theirs. Step 5 sees the community watershed team proudly presenting their ideas to their friends and neighbours. They discuss and come to an agreement. Under the next step, number 6, plans are referred to the Wareda watershed team for approval. The community's plan is part of a jigsaw, and it should fit into the overall pattern of the district. Then under step 7, an implementation strategy is formulated. Who does what, when and how. Most of the labour is provided freely, and people seem to enjoy working in groups. There's positive feedback for everyone when they look back at the end of the day and admire how much they've achieved. After the technology is in place, it's the community watershed team that takes responsibility for step 8, participatory monitoring and evaluation. Measurements are taken of how quickly trees are growing, how much crop yields have improved, and what breakages have occurred in terrace bunds, for example. Community members provide information to the team, and they discuss the results. It helps them plan for future action. And it means that when visitors are received, they can show the difference in the field and in their record books too. charts and posters are made and proudly hung on the walls of the meeting room. Why does it all work so well? Probably because at local level, the process is meaningful, manageable, and measurable. A true change from the historical top-down approach. But it's not just a process at community and district levels. It's supported and encouraged by each regional bureau of agriculture. And at national level, it's the ministry itself that steers the process. This is coordinated activity at work, and it's been rolled out all over the country. Whole landscapes have been repaired. The jigsaw is rapidly being filled in. So what can be learnt from this scaling up of the approach in Ethiopia? Let's look at the key points. The common methodology described so clearly in the guidelines is one. A second is the flow of information about success from one area to another. Thirdly, training is taken very seriously. And finally, there's a concerted national campaign that drives the participatory process forward. Underpinning that campaign are the country's leaders. International development partners are encouraged to buy into the process, and they have endorsed it with their investment programs. What's more, they work together as a partnership. So back to our original question. Is there any way out of the cycle of land degradation and rural poverty in sub-Saharan Africa? Perhaps there is. Ethiopia's tried and tested model is healing the landscape and feeding her people. But it's doing more than that. It's pioneering a new approach and inspiring the whole of sub-Saharan Africa by proving that participatory processes can thrive. And from the smallest local scale, this can spread and begin to cover the whole of the country.